So a lot of people just in our generation don't want to have kids. Like, it's pretty typical for a guy, oh, I don't want to have kids, it's such a stressful burden. He'll be starting, and like, that's true. But like, here's the thing, challenge is kind of important in life. It's one thing I realized, it's like not really good to be super comfortable and like not have kids. Like if my family, like, think about this, like if my family chose to not have kids, if my parents just didn't do it, I would exist. You understand? Like, and I'm sure glad that I exist. So the idea that not having kids, like the whole like abortion and like all this dumb leftist shit, a lot of it comes from men, because there's just a lot of men who just don't want, like, let's just face it. This is an actual red pill truth that a lot of red pill people and a lot of men don't want to face, but a lot of it is you. A lot of these, this cultural stuff, like if you have the attitude, oh, I don't want to have kids, it's like you lack ambition. And you're not, and then you're gonna, a lot of the same guys, they'll go back, oh, I'm bitching, oh, I keep relapsing on NoFap, regardless of like, and I've been in a lot of, with a lot of accountability partners, and like I said, I'm not perfect, and I'm definitely guilty of doing some of this, but if you choose to not have any ambition as a man, you're not going to be happy. It's like the same, and it's the same thing with women. Like when they don't have kids, they're end up alone. You're gonna end up alone. Like literally, you're saying, I want to end up a lonely person for the rest of my life when I'm old. It's like, if you grow old and you don't have children, literally things will be pointless. Literally, we are programmed, we are hardwired to do this. It is not a choice. It's not a if, and, or but. It is a biological requirement. It's just like pooping. It's just like having sex. It's just like all of those needs. It's up there. It has to do with survival. So I think it's important for long-term satisfaction, even though it's challenging and things can go wrong. It's a risk. It can ruin your life too. That's the thing that's crazy about it. It's a double-edged sword. But it's the reason society exists. Like, people having kids is why we have what we have as in society. Like, people don't really understand, like, there's an important aspect. It's an important aspect of society regardless. And it's a very nihilistic view, if you ask me. And it's really interesting because people will also say, like, oh, I believe in God. And the current guy I'm talking to about this, like, there's a particular person who, he says he convicted with God, but he doesn't understand, like, that's a commandment from the Quran. Like, that's not, like, he's a Islamic, and I'm sure in the Quran that it's probably not a question, like, you're not allowed to question the Quran like any religion. You're kind of required to have children. It's kind of like a commandment, so, by God, and so it's a very good commandment. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. So I don't know, it's just like being in our natural space, and I think not having children is a very unnatural concept, if you ask me. It's like just like suicide. It's like in hookup culture and all these things that are kind of normal in our generation, they're not normal. In the millennial Gen Z, whatever, like, these are fairly recent concepts that were not possible 200 years ago. Like 200 years ago, you wouldn't be, you'd be struggling with survival still. You understand, we've come to a point in our history, like, and this is actually a very recent thing, where there's more peace. Like, there's less people struggling to die, like struggling to eat. Like, literally World War II was 60 years ago. People had to live on rations. There wasn't any of this, what is happening right now. So this, my opinion is that this is a temporary point. This isn't normal. So there will be a point where things go back to the way things were, where there's war, famine, death, horrible things happening, disease. We've already had a pandemic recently, and like, it's just people let down their guard thinking that these events just stop. And it's like, yeah, we can come up with all the conspiracies and all that. That's why it was such a shock to our generation, because we really just haven't had any challenges. Like, honestly, we haven't had, it wasn't even, the pandemic was honestly, like, as bad as it was, I mean, thousands of people died, like, millions of people died, but it was mostly older people. It didn't really affect us in, like, a way that was actually challenging to our generation. So the fact is that we have become spoiled. I mean, the idea of just like a lot of people in our culture, like, we don't have any identity. It's kind of depressing, actually, that we haven't been challenged. Even boomers were challenged somewhat. They still had to go through some shit. Like, say whatever you want about boomers, but at the end of the day, like, they went through the Vietnam War. I mean, like, they did experience some, like, hard times. Like, there was racism. I mean, literally, Martin Luther King. They saw some stuff that we've really been in the, like, best time. Like, I know people are like, oh, but it's still happening. Like, oh, there's all this inequality. And it's like, there always will be inequality. I think that's where our generation has really failed too. It's because, like, we don't even understand, like, the great things that are happening. Like, there's so many, it's so peaceful and good that, like, we're making up problems, like the gender stuff, all the, like, the issues that endlessly keep going on, like all the LGBT. It's just like, dude, that wasn't a thing. Like yeah, LGBT was kind of a thing back in the 60s, but it wasn't like honestly, gay people have been around for a long time. It's not like, I don't think it was even that bad in the 60s. Like, oh my god, yeah, it's like no one accepts us. It's like, yeah, people still don't really accept gay people. Like, that's just the truth. Like, normal people don't really accept all this weird stuff, and it's just the fact that it keeps going and going on, and there's all these letters added to the alphabet thing, and then it's just like, it got to a point where I just, like, I growing up and being, my family's fairly liberal. I used to be very liberal, and honestly, a lot of this stuff, like, I just got sick of it. I was like, hey, you know what, I'm gonna be conservative, because it's just never ending. It's always gonna be like, oh my god, this is wrong. Society, we live in a society where people poop on the toilets, don't clean up after themselves, and things aren't perfect. It's just, there always will be that type of thing. Like, the conservative side just has a much more chill, like, okay, like, look, we get it, like, there's these problems, but we need society to function, like, on this basic level. Like, we still need these things. And the liberal side doesn't have any solution to actual day-to-day problems that affect people. That's my biggest argument against liberalism. Very little, like, most of it's always just emotional bullshit. Most of it has nothing to do with actual change. Like, it's just emotional. Oh man, this person pooped on the sidewalk, even though people don't do that. And there's countries where people poop on the sidewalk, like India, like, or wherever. I don't know. They might not do that anymore. I'm not trying to generalize on Indians, but there's just cultural things in other countries that I think Americans just take everything for granted, and specifically liberals take things so much more for granted. And the division, that I've seen with my parents, where, like, they'll be on Facebook and they'll literally post something political, and then they'll get in an argument for, with somebody who doesn't agree with them, and then they'll be like, they'll get surprised that somebody argued with them, and then they'll, like, block them or get, like, in this big fight with the person because they don't agree. I just think then don't talk about politics. It's like, if you can't, you understand, like, if you put out a post that hates on Donald Trump, for instance, and somebody who likes Donald Trump posts on the same page, and, like, disagrees with you, like, just, you're kind of, like, fishing for that. So it's just interesting, because my parents would do that, and they'd just be like, it's like, it's kind of your fault. I mean, it's like, yeah, I get it, you don't agree with whatever political thing, but posting about politics on Facebook is just the stupidest, dumbest thing. It doesn't change anything. And then we get into the whole thing with Twitter. Don't even get me started on Twitter. That's the thing. We got the generational divide, where people in the boomer generation, like, that's one thing I've noticed with my parents, they just don't really get it, what we're going through, like, as a generation. They don't really understand that we're so spoiled. We're just so spoiled. We have so many good things to be happy about, and we don't realize that. Like, we're in a peaceful place, and it's like, but it seems like we're in some kind of weird, horrible hellhole, because there's such a hostile divide between genders, and there's like these, the feminists versus the anti-feminists, and the MGTOWs, and It just goes on and on and on, and it's never going to end. So my thing is, be kind to people, because you just don't know what they're going through. You don't know, even if maybe they voted for Trump, but try to understand why they voted for Trump, instead of just hating, like, just being like, oh, fuck that guy. He supports whatever, something I don't support. Like, honestly, I have nothing against liberals. I have nothing against people who disagree with me. My problem is we tend to just judge people like that. And it's the same thing with religion. It's like, people in religion tend to just be like, this is the one way. That is very human. That's why people, that's why for a long time I was an atheist, because I would always be like, the concept of there being one way of thinking. That's why I'm more of a deist. I don't really subscribe to a religious thing, and I don't try to force it on people. So anyway, peace.